Good morning. Today we're going to be looking at how we can link our Xcode projects using Swift as a language. So we can use it so we can have interaction between the user on the GUI side, so it can actually talk with that and have action happen based on that. Previously we looked at how to just do the basics of building an interface using Interface Builder, and we tested that out with it inside the simulator on iOS. Today we're going to be looking at taking that a step further. Like we did with Android, we had the original of our stupid project that simply just loaded up an app and it did very little. We're going to take that and take it a step further by building what was the equivalent of Silly App in Android. We're going to make it so we can change colors based on user interaction with this. So let's go ahead and we've opened up our project within here in Xcode. We have our interface builder highlighted right here, and we're going to toggle open our project navigator. And to do that, we can either do the command 1 key sequence or command 0 and select the project navigator. So command 1 to open it up right here. It immediately pulls up this one right here. If we hover over it, we can see it's the project navigator, like I just said. That's command 1 sequence to get that out. And that's where we have that, basically it's like the package explorer we saw in Eclipse. So we can see the structural components of our app. And we're inside, obviously selected right here, our main storyboard. And we're going to use a couple different features with this. And so that's what we're going for today on that. And so we've got our storyboard open. And I'm going to toggle that back closed, because we're going to use a couple really powerful features of this. So command 0 to close it back down. And we still have our outline open. The outline, again, is going to be very helpful for us. We added in all of these GUI components, and we added those in just so we could test out how they would look. We saw that there's some definite differences between how they look here on the interface builder screen, and then making it so it looks specifically for the regular device that we'll be looking at. And we're going to be having a lesson specifically on that coming up, so we can make sure that we match the way it looks in Simulator to the actual display itself. And that's going to be one of our upcoming lessons, just FYI. We have over here on the right-hand side, we have our utility panel. And the utility panel is where we dragged all those components over, and we remember that. We also have right here in our objects list, this is where all the components that we dragged into our panel came from. And we can specify all the parameters and values for those different objects right here. Up in our property inspector, which is the lovely little arrow indicator on this, or attributes inspector, excuse me, not property inspector. So we talked about that. We'll close this side panel down by doing Alt-Command 0, which will close the side panel out. So we can swap out those side panels by either Command 0 or Alt-Command 0, and we can swap those back out. This gives us a nice big screen we have access to, so we can see our actual sequence of our emulator. And this is where we're going to actually do some code happening with this, because we want to see how we link our code directly to our GUI. And so this part is very different from what we've been doing in Android. In Android, we simply specified it with the find view by ID, and we had the code link, so we had to actually type in to make that happen. On Apple development, it's a very different structure. We're going to use the keyboard and the mouse together to actually make this happen. So it's very important that we identify what are the actual sequence of keystrokes / mouse movements we do to make this happen. So just FYI, we have to actually watch what we do this time. I know, craziness. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a specific sequence right here where we're going to open what's called the Assistant Editor. And there are a couple ways you can open the Assistant Editor. If we move our cursor up here onto the user bar, and we scroll over here, we have this immediate sequence right here where we have the Show the Assistant Editor. It's those little two circles together right there. We can open it that way. We also have a keystroke sequence for showing the Assistant Editor. And the Assistant Editor sequence is as we can see right here, is the Alt-Command-Enter sequence. And so we're going to use the Alt-Command-Enter sequence as much as possible, because keyboarding is almost always faster than dragging the mouse out of the way, and you can then immediately start typing. So we're going to show that Assistant Editor sequence. So again, I've got my interface builder selected right here, and it's Alt-Command-Enter. And as you can see, immediately afterwards, we have its associated code screen popping up to the right directly of our interface builder. So we have our interface builder for our storyboard listed right here. We're in our main storyboard right here. And on main storyboard, its associated ViewController for every view has a ViewController attached to it, immediately open in its Assistant Editor. And so we're going to have that, so we'll be using this quite often. We have right here with the Assistant Editor, it links files together. Now, I first found this use of this tool when I was starting with the original version of Xcode, when we were doing, when I was starting with iOS development using Objective-C. And with Objective-C, and in fact all of C#, or sorry, not C#, with C++, Objective-C, and C itself, you often have what are called header files, where you have a .h file, and what the Assistant Editor allows you to do is you can have your header file in one pane and your code file, your .c.cpp file, or .m file, in the associated pane. So you can write the headers for methods and the associated implementation code at the same time. Very, very helpful. So you can keep track of those. But on the interface builder, this is how we actually link our code to our GUI. So we're going to see this right here and actually build with that. It's a really helpful tool. Just our default code that came with our ViewController. We wrote no code for this. So when we first built our app and we played it, if I go and play that right now, using Command R to run my app, I'll load my app right here. My build was successful. I pull up my app, and here is my lovely app of joy. And if I click on any of these actions, they do work GUI-wise. I can click on the button. You can see that the button itself has an interaction. We are going to be able to link that to code right here. We have right here in our interface builder, we've got a couple things we can do. So I'm right here. I've got my lovely screen. I can see what my different components, and I've got a bunch of components in here. It's honestly, this screen is really ugly. So we're going to get rid of it all. So we're going to go up here, and to remove things, I can select them in my outline and just hit the delete key. They're gone. Okay, so I'm back over here. I'm going to toggle open my window. And so to turn off the assistant editor, I do have to, when I Alt-Command-Enter, I have to actually close the assistant editor with the X button. It's not an automatic close. So I close that right there. I'm going to Alt-Toggle my utility panel and to get that back open. So it's Alt-Command-0 to toggle my utility panel. Instead of the text of button, I would change it for what I want to do. So we're going to do this like we've done before, and so we're going to do this to change the color. Reposition it by making the alignment happen so it aligns vertically and horizontally using the visual guide of the blue bar. We've made a couple of changes in this. Always a great idea at this point to save and commit. So open up if you haven't already opened up GitHub, great time to open up GitHub as well, make those changes. Since saying that we're rearranging our GUI or we're adding some features there. And this is also, if you were doing this would be a great spot to branch off if you wanted to do a branch. But we'll take care of that if you want to. So we have our button right here. Our button has been aligned in the middle of our screen. We can see that our button is inside the actual view in our controller outline. This outline document is going to be very helpful. In fact, it's going to make life so much easier for this next sequence. So we're going to toggle the utility panel back off again with Alt-Command-0. And I'm going to scroll this lovely little over here to the left so it's out of the way a bit. And I'm going to open up my assistant editor. And the assistant editor is Alt-Command-Enter. So Alt-Command-Enter to open up the assistant editor. Again, you can also access it with this option right here. You can click it off with that as well. And I'm going to select this so I can see my GUI fairly cleanly right here. I can go over here on this and I can right click on this and I can zoom out so I can see it the full thing. Also very helpful. So I see my entire list or my entire screen by right clicking and zooming to a factor that I can actually see. So that way I can see what's in here. I can see my code easily on the right hand side. And the assistant editor, as I said earlier, this is how we can link the files together. And so what we're going to do is we're going to use the ctrl-click. So we have to actually, it's a way of specifying that we're linking something. So I'm going to go over here onto my view controller outline. In the view section, I'm going to get my button selected. Notice it automatically zooms us into 100% at that point. That's a feature of Xcode, so it clearly indicates what you're talking about. I'm going to hold the control key down and click on that button and drag over to my assistant editor. And as you can see right here, it automatically brings a lovely bar with the options of insert outlet, action, or outlet collection. And this is how we are going to link directly our GUI to our code. Question, sir?
So when I make my program, it comes up with all this code and everything.
Okay, so you should be, this is in your simple project. Are you inside your view controller or are you inside your, did you do a simple project? Just a single view pane?
Yeah.
Okay, give me a couple seconds and I'll come take a look at that for you in just a bit, okay?
Okay.
What's the name of the file up here on the top where it says automatic on mine ViewController.swift?
Automatic UI view controller.
So you're actually in UI view controller? You should be in class view controller UI view controller. Something it should look like this right here. So if you're on right here on your automatic like this, go over in this section. Let me just unclick this. On right here on automatic, click on this ViewController.swift section, and you can go to Manual, and then choose your project, and then the app folder, and you should choose ViewController.swift, which should be in that list.
Okay.
And that should be a more appropriate list.
Yeah.
Okay, good. And that we'll see if what's making that not work automatically, but that honestly should be okay. We'll take a look at that later. Okay, so let's try that again. So again, what I do, I hold the Control key down. Gents, thank you. So on my outline, the outline is the easiest way to do this. I can also do it directly from the interface builder, but if you have a complex interface, it becomes very difficult to select the individual one or if they're close together. And so this way you can force select the correct one and force select multiples if you need to. But I'm going to force select the button itself, Control-click, so I can then get access to it. You can see automatically I have a lovely blue dot right here where my cursor is. I then drag that cursor into my ViewController class. And I'm just putting it in here right here at the top to make it easy. As it's a method, it can go anywhere that's on its own, so it can't go inside here. It can't go inside here, but it can go between them or below them. But I'm going to put it right here at the top just because it's easy. And again, we have options for insert outlet, action, or outlet collection. Once I see that pop up or hover, I release, and it brings me a new pop-up window. In this pop-up window, the first thing I'm going to select is I want to choose an action. I'm going to create a method or func for this button to call. And it's inside the ViewController. That's to specify the object that we're in. We have ViewController.swift. That's the object we're talking about. We will see more about this later in some subsequent videos. This is where I name my method, and I'm going to make this be a change background color. Using my standard naming conventions of a method. My type on this, instead of being any object, I'm going to select it to be UI button. I'm forcing it to only do this for a button calling it. So when a button calls it, it's going to call the change background color method. And I'm using the event of touch up inside. And the argument that we pass to it is sender. And I just, at that point, hit the connect button. When I do that, it then brings me a method header right here with the @IBAction keyword, followed by our func keyword, that method name we just specified, which we can change if we want to change it or we did a typo. And then as a parameter, sender, which is of type UI button. If you're having trouble making the connection between your ViewController scene and your controller itself, first thing you want to make sure is that you're inside, instead of just being in just any random something in interface builder, make sure you're in your actual storyboard for the main storyboard or any subsequent view that's a main part of your project, not the launch screen. Launch screens don't have the ability to have an interface attached to it or code attached to it, so that's what you want to make sure you're in the right one. So again, make sure that you're inside for your thing right here. I am inside my main.storyboard. Okay, so the question was, what exactly is sender doing when it says sender : UI button? And what we're happening right here is we're saying that this function right here will be called by a button press. And so that's what the sender : UI button is referring to. We are saying that the sender is of type UI button. Now, this, as we saw earlier, the colon can be attached to sender or UI button. For class, I'd like to attach the colon to the type. That forces us to, in our mental reading and our structural reading, to read it that the sender is of type UI button. In my outline for my interface, I then Control-click and drag from the Control-click into the ViewController in a separate method. I can do it before, between, or after. We're doing it before because it's easy. It then brings up a pop-up menu. In that pop-up menu, again, I choose to make this to be an action because I'm creating an action for this. I name it something that makes sense, reflecting what it is, what it does. In this case, change background color. And it's of type. It's only going to be called by the button. So I'm specifying that it's only a button that will call it. The event that we're having it choose it on is the touch up inside. So basically, I'm selecting when I release it, the touch up event. So I've released my finger. There are other events you can have attached to that. If I click on that down triangle, you can see there's lots of things I could choose from. I can have a separate event for touch down, touch cancel, touch down repeat, touch drag, etc. But most of the time, for button click, it's touch up inside. and my argument will be the sender. I then hit the connect button. Change color of type sender is a UI button object. We'll just put the parens right there so we can see that. So our IBAction func name is called change color, and it has a sender, which is a UI button, and so that creates the actual event that will happen when I click the button. It will call the change color method. So that's where we're at right now. We've made that method. We've linked it inside our GUI. This is a fantabulous place to save, commit to GitHub. If you've not already done so, please do so. We've added the IBAction. That's that linking of the GUI to our code. It is a prefix keyword for a func. And our func is only going to be called by a UI button. And so we have in code right here, we have that lovely indicator that this is linked to a button. Even though it doesn't have that, we could even write the @IBAction right here, but we want to actually link it ourselves, and so that's why we did that right there. And we're going to now make it so we can make this so it'll change color, and we're going to do it just internally in this method, then we'll extract it out into its own method after we write the code. So to do that, we're going to make a couple variables. We're going to use constant variables for this because of the fact that we can, because they are only used when they're defined in the method and never changed. And so since Swift has that special keyword of let, we're going to use them here in that case because they're only defined when needed. So let would be a fantastic word for them. And so we're going to use the keyword let, which says this is a constant. And we'll use our standard naming convention for constants, which is cap separated by underscore. And we'll do new red. And that just looks really bad. I'm going to stick with the naming convention that Swift is talking about. Okay. In this case, we're going to stick with the regular Swift naming convention. Constants I don't like, but we'll try this out. I think we're going to try this. So we're going to try this new green. It's a lot easier to read and to type than using the separate words. So we're going to try this. We're going to try breaking my own naming convention for this. Just take a look at that. So we're going to say let new green. Yes, I know exceptions to rules. They do occasionally happen. And because we're using let, it's only going to be assigned the value once when we actually create it. And we're going to use the equal sign. It's going to be typed as what's called a CG float. That is the type it needs for this. So capital CGF, LOAT. And we're going to cast the result into a CG float. So we're going to take a number and cast it as a CG float. The number is going to happen here in math, just like it does in Java, just like it does in C++, just like in C#, just different ways of calling casting. This is how you cast an answer, is by doing the type and then parens around what you're going to be casting it to. So we're casting this as a CG float. So this force casts it. It's explicitly typing it as a CG float type. And so we're going to do inside here, we're going to do the double. We're going to do another internal casting. And we're going to call an existing method inside Swift. It's called arc for random uniform. And so it's spelled a little bit differently. Arc for random underscore uniform. And this is going to give us a random number within a range up to 255. So guess what we pass it? 256. So we're arc for random 255, or 256 gives us a number between 0 and 255. We're going to take that number and we are going to divide it by 255.000, which is obviously a double value right there. So we're going to get a random number between 0 and 255 for this. And that should be cast right there as a double with that extra parens. So we're going to take that number, cast as a double, divide it by 255 to get the percentage of red, green, and blue. So I have my new green variable right there. Let's do the same thing for red and blue. I had the extra parens in the wrong spot, so save. There we go. So I have CG float is a double passing an arc for random underscore uniform, passing that value of 256. So we're going to cast it as a CG float, the result of arc for random, number between 0 and 255. It's always, we want to make sure we put our parens in the right spot. Always a great thing to catch ourselves in. And we do the same thing for let new blue, which gives us the percentage of red, green, and blue. Because 1 out of 255 is obviously going to be, it'll be less than 1%. We have 0 out of 255 will be 0%. up to and including 100% if we get 255 for our random number up into that point. So we would have this much red, this much green, this much blue. We have the indicators right here of yellow saying they're not used yet. That's okay, we're going to take care of that. What we're going to do is inside this, we're going to say view.background color equals UI color parens, and I'm going to say red colon. So we're going to assign to the red variable, new red, comma, blue colon, and we'll assign into the blue. We'll pass it new blue. Actually, it should be green, RGB. Green colon, derp, new green. Into blue, we're going to pass it new blue. And then we're going to pass into alpha channel. We're going to pass it simply 1.0. We're going to immediately pass the alpha as 1.0, a full alpha channel, so it'll be completely opaque. Hit save on that. And I have a view background. I said color when I spoke and I didn't type it. Oh, silliness. How dare I? So I'm going to move this out here a bit so we can see this a little bit easier. So we have our view.background color equals a UI color. We're calling an init method. Excuse me. We're calling an init. Because we're calling an init, we must give every parameter its label. So the first parameter, because it's an init, must be labeled. So we have red gets the new red value, green gets new green, blue new blue. The opacity, we're saying this is going to be completely opaque. So we pass it 1.0 or 100%, because that's how it creates the color in this case. We're going to go ahead and hit save on this and run, Command R. Again, great spot to commit. We've added code in here. All right, so we want to look at and see what was causing that problem, what was causing our struggle there, and why deleting it didn't actually get rid of our problem. And so by looking through this, I was going over and looking at my code and looking over here on my actual button. So we noticed that when I was looking at that there, I saw a quick little selection right here saying that there was a highlight on this, saying that the outlet was attached to it. So I go to check that. I go over here onto my button, on my outline of my document. I right-click on it right here, and I see that I have a sent event selected down here on touch up inside. I did not properly remove my touch up inside selection. So I'm going to go over here and choose the X on that to kill it. I no longer have any outlet attached to it, so it was trying to send it out to something that did not exist, hence causing the problem. So I've got nothing attached to this. I'm going to go ahead and save here and run again. Okay, clicking button, nothing happens. Good? Yes? Okay, go back over here. We're going to go back to our inspector. Go back and select our storyboard. We're going to open our lovely helper window, our assistant editor. Toggle that back over. Go back over here. I'm going to paste my method in here. So I'm going to click on that so it's selected. Control drag to my screen. Insert an action. So I choose action. Change background color. And it's of type UI button. Touch up inside. Hit connect. Inside here is where I'm going to paste my code that we have. So we're going to say let, and then we'll give a number, new green, new red. Let's start new red. Equals, cast as CG float, parens on that, cast as a double, the result of arc for random underscore uniform, parens 256, parens, we want to get that number, we want to then divide that by 255.00, which again will give us the percentage of red, green, and blue. We then do view.background color equals UI color, which is the init. And we're going to pass it red colon to indicate the red label. We're passing it new red, comma, green label. We'll pass it new green. And for blue label, we'll pass it new blue. And for our alpha channel, we are simply going to pass it 1.0 because we want it to be 100% opaque. I click on my color, and my background successfully changes. Hooray! Now, this background right here obviously makes our app a little bit better than what it was. We successfully were able to change that back by removing that existing outlet, that was the incorrect outlet that was attached to it. One of the only problems you have to notice when you're dealing with Xcode, when you are working with the IB outlet, IBAction connection, you can attach the multiple outlets to the same object. To do so, again, we right-click over here on the outlet on the outline and check to make sure what our touch-up inside is. I could have another one on there. I did not properly clear that out, which caused the error. So I now have that linked specifically to this, and we can see that that happens. So now we want to talk about how we can make that app work a little bit better, more refined code. So save this, commit, always great to do. We're going to go in, after you've made your commit to GitHub, we're going to go out, our outlet's going to stay the same, but I'm going to go, instead of Storyboard, I'm going to go to my ViewController file. And in my ViewController, we have it right now so that the code itself is all happening inside the change background. So what we want to do is we want to have this code so it's more a little bit refactored out so we can actually use this in other spots. So we're going to make a helper method for it, like we've done before. So we're just going to say func, not funky, and change color, because you might use this on more than one app. This is simply a helper method we'll have. So it's a void type indicated by the fact that there's no arrow indicator right here. It takes no parameters indicated by the empty parens, and it's a method just indicated by func. What we're going to do is we're going to take all that code out of here, cut it, paste it back inside change color, and then we'll simply call change color inside our listed action. So the @IBfunc change background color that gets past a button as the sender, we will call the change color method in that. Again, so we made it so that we have the ability to do that, our quick little project right there. So we have it so it calls that method. We define a method right here, change color, by putting that code we had in there originally. Again, we have our red, green, and blue parameters. We cast them as a CG float, and which types them as CG float to start off with immediately. They are constant, they're unchanging every time the method gets called. And I take the value for that, I make a double version of the random number between 0 and 255. I divide it by 255.000 so I can get a percentage value. Because in Swift we do our color by the percentage of red, percentage of green, percentage of blue, and percentage of alpha. We then cast it right here by initializing UI color, passing the values of new red, new green, new blue, and a fully opaque background, because our background is opaque, it's solid. And we call that method right here. So we've taken that our stupid project that did basically nothing. We removed a bunch of the garbage on there and added that. Question?
Are we going to be changing the button color like on our other one?
Could you change the button color and other components? Yes, you can. So we have our UI, our sender is our UI button, and so what we have right here, we have this information right here where we have viewed up background color. We could make it so we could change the color of our object itself, the button that's in there, and so we could call that in there, and that's where we'd have attached the IB outlet on that. We define our button as a reference in here. We'll be working on that. What we could also do is I want you to play around with the idea of trying that we could do this with another tool. So right now, just simply by adding the function right that, we pass it with that. I want, for your assignment, I want you to recreate this in a brand new app, just so you can make a quick app that will call the method and make something else happen. You can have console print line, you could have all sorts of stuff happen. You could change the color of something. So background color is the name of our view. It's our view itself that we have inside this. We can see by looking over here in our, excuse me please, in our storyboard, we have our view, which is what we're talking about right here. And it's referred to right here on the view.change. We have our view.background color. which refers to the view itself, which is our view that we have inside this. It's its reference to itself. What your new project should be, your silly project, is I want you to make it so you have multiple buttons that you can then specify the color. One of the things you can do, instead of having a random color, is you can actually get specific colors. And so right here, I'm going to comment out line 25. And I can say view.background color equals UI color dot red color. Many of the simple colors are specified like that. So for your silly project, the updated version of silly project we did with Android, I want you to make a new version. Instead of making it only be random colors, I want you to pick some colors and make buttons attached to those colors as well. So you can use the idea of color specified based on a named color. So this will require you to look to see what colors are in the named thing of UI color. As you can see, red color is valid. We've already done a random color, which we've done multiple times. So you need to add some buttons or try using the selector sequence or multi-button feature. You could attach it to a slider. You could have a red, green, and blue slider. Attach that. You could use a switch, so you can switch back and forth between colors. Segmented control, the one I was looking for a minute ago, where you could have each segment has a different color attached to it. I want you to make a new project. It needs to have at least 3 buttons or 3 segmented controls or the use of a slider. So you can have it so it can get the colors changing at least in either by using multiple buttons, like here's this color, this color, this color, or you can have it so you can drag and select the color using sliders. We had some people already do that. But it's the idea that you're linking that object. So if I were to take a slider on, I drag the slider here. I would then go over here to my horizontal slider. My assistant editor, I would click on that lovely thing right here. I would then control-click from here to this, inserting an action, explaining that I'm passing it a UI slider, and I can see how I could get that slider to set my red, green, and blue values. We've done that in Android. We've done that with App Inventor. That'd be a great one you could try within Swift. You could also just have it set so instead of using the slider, you can have multiple buttons. So you have multiple buttons so you can choose different colors that you want to have. But it's the idea that we're practicing using Swift and combining the IBAction to a specific button. So again, quick review, what we did. We added our button to our screen. We control drag from the button over to the assistant editor. It attaches a method attached to it. We made it so it's a helper method so we can call it inside there. So it keeps our method a little bit cleaner for that purpose. And that also gives us the ability to get access to this as needed. These lovely error messages are happening because I threw that bad code in. We pull all this up so it's out of the assistant editor and go back to our main editor. And we'll go to our view controller. Inside our view controller, if I comment this line out, we have it so that let new red, new green, new blue. We had it so we created that random number. We talked about how to make a random number in Swift. Again, for random number in Swift, use arc for random underscore uniform. That gives us a random number between 0 up to, but not including, 256. We take that number, divide it by 255 to get a percentage of red, green, and blue, and then create the new color by passing those values in. We also saw that we can assign specific colors by doing UI color dot and then the named color value. That's one of your options you can do for that, or by using your slider value to do a more controlled color sequence. You can have labels that will show that, but your project itself that you need to do is you need to make a new project separate from stupid project. This is now silly project in Apple, in iOS. You can have it so you can have at least 3 buttons that change colors to named values, or using sliders or some other feature to work on playing with the linking of an IB outlet or button to the IB action. So to fix it again, that's a great question actually, so I'll do that before I close this off. So I go back over here, I go to in my lovely storyboard file, I look at my outline. On my outline, I right-clicked on it. I scrolled down, and I saw that I had an extra touch-up inside IBAction selected. I removed it by pressing that lovely X right there. I I could add another one. I'm not going to right now. So if I delete this, I'd have to recreate it again. Recreate that action. So might as well do it. So I will hit right click on here. I'm going to take that IBAction. That takes it out. There's now no longer an action on that. If I open my assistant editor, Alt Command Enter, you can notice that my IBAction link right here is empty. This is often referred to as a well. So if I control click on this and drag it to that existing IBAction, notice how it is connected to it, and it brings up the connect action sequence. That will then highlight it, links it right here. It's now selected to that button. So it's a link to the button over here on this. So if you click on this, you notice that it also shows the change the color is attached to that. And I can test that by doing Command R. Click on that, it changes color again. The question was, if we want to have a bunch of buttons that each change a color to a specific color, that would be putting this selected line right here, the view.background color to whatever named color you're doing, would be what you would put inside the associated @IBAction for that button. And that would be a great selection for that.